Welcome to the Thought Brothers. The Thought Brothers are here. It's a lot going on here. We're going to have a 10-minute timer. These brothers are going to be able to do whatever they want to do within 10 minutes, and then we're going to bring it back home for closing. We got the banker, man, Carlos, here. He's going to start off on deck. Carlos, hit us. What's going on?
Hey, Happy New Year again. I want to say to Gary, Mr. Spivey, and CJ, glad to be here. We got a lot of stuff happening in 2024. We're going to make it happen. With all that's happened this past first few days of the year, the focus has been on college football. Okay. So I was a little worried that Washington might upset Michigan, man, based on that offense they got. And I'm going to tell you, man, I was actually surprised that Michigan did what they did to Washington. Now, I don't know the reasons why. I'm not a college football guy as much as I am NFL or even high school. But I will say this, okay? Washington had a great season, undefeated season until the national championship. That says something, okay? Michigan, same thing. Now, I didn't know Michigan had not won a national championship for about 25, 26, or 27 years, something to that effect, because their program is so historic and is so dominant that you would think they've won one at least once every 10 years, but it hasn't been that way. So, hats off to Coach Harbaugh for pulling that out. I think that has special meaning when you're actually a player for a school, and then you go back as a coach and you win a national championship. I mean, that's like probably the dream most athletes would probably have, and he's done it. I think to top it all off, we have to look at a couple other things that may be happening. With success always comes a little controversy. If he's that successful, people are saying, well, did that scandal that happened during the season with the signal stealing or calling or whatever come into play? I don't really think so. I mean, I think the bottom line is you still got to line up to play football. I'm not sure what was actually, said or concluded with that scandal during the season. I know he served a 3-game suspension where he wasn't on the sidelines, and the assistant coach did a great job. So, but they came back. They beat the teams they needed to beat. They won the national championship, so hats off to Michigan. With that being said, it leads me to believe that the Pac-12 is like the Pac-2 right now. I believe UCLA and USC are rolling out to the Big Ten, and we also got Oregon going to the Big Ten. So I'm like, wow. I have to even review to see who's left in the Pac-12 at this point. But with that being said, is it safe to say that the SEC and the Big Ten are now, minor leagues for the NFL? Because it seems like that's the two power conferences now. The Pac-12 and the ACC and the Big 12 were also supposed to be one of the 5 out of the 5 top conferences. Again, with the Big 10 and SEC, it was supposed to be the Pac-12, ACC, and the Big 12. But obviously, when they chose the final 4 teams to compete, the ACC was left out because Florida State was also undefeated, but they weren't put into the college football bowl playoffs system. We won't have that problem next year because it'll be going to 12 teams. Okay, so with that being said, congratulations to Michigan for an outstanding season. Congratulations to Washington for an outstanding season. But with that being said, on college football, I might have to get some feedback from you guys because late breaking news. I'm showing a report January 10th, 5:46 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. They're saying the GOAT, Nick Saban, is retiring. Come on, man. 72-year-old Nick Saban retiring? What's going on, man? I know he's 72. He probably may be considered to be at that retirement age, but man, it looked like he was still going strong on those sidelines. Come on, man. Somebody give me some feedback. Let's start with Mr. Spivey. What's going on, Mr. Spivey?
Well, you got to you got to think about it. Nick Saban is 72 years old, and it's a lot of pressure on you. I mean, he had a lot of pressure on him for that game with Michigan, which he lost. And this year has not, I mean, I know they went 11-1, but this has not been a good year for him. They have really scrambled to win a lot of those games. They've come back and won them in the last minute. And, Nick Saban is at a point, as CJ always talk about the president, Nick Saban is reaching an age where he doesn't want that to be at practice 6 days a week, running around, traveling with a football team, worried about beating Ohio State and Michigan State. I mean, he's at a point in his life where, he's proven himself. I mean, he's kind of in the same vein as Belichick. I mean, what else do you need to prove? I mean, he's won, I believe, how many national championships? 5?
7, I think. I think 7.
Okay, so he's won 7 national championships. The big question, Carlos, is what's going to happen with Michigan's coach, Harbaugh. Is he going to leave at the end of this year? I understand there's 3 or 4 teams, Denver and a couple of other teams. As a matter of fact, I think the Chargers is one of the teams that's looking at him. So is he going to leave college and come back into the pros? He was with San Francisco for, I think, 4 years, and he took them to playoff 3 years in a row. So now he's won a national championship. The only thing left for him is the Super Bowl. So, and Nick Saban, I don't think Nick Saban has ever had any desire to leave college and come into the pros, because I think if Nick Saban years ago, with the way he was winning, had expressed an interest in coming into the NFL, he could have been there.
Oh, Nick Saban was in the NFL for a short period of time with Miami.
Yeah, he was, but he wasn't a head coach.
That's right. No, he was a head coach.
He was the head coach.
It didn't work out too well, believe it or not.
Yeah. Okay, I stand corrected.
He was the head coach.
But no, I can understand him saying, I mean, he had a good run with Young last year, and this quarterback this year just wasn't the same caliber. And I think this kid I don't think he's a senior, so I think he'll be back next year. So he would have had to deal with him for another year, and so I can understand his decision. But it's going to be interesting to see where Harbaugh goes.
Hey, let me break before we switch over and get CJ and Gary in there. Something else I want you to be aware of. Right now, Coach Harbaugh in Michigan is the closest thing we have to Jesus Christ. Okay, they love him. They will part the oceans, the roads, the seas. He can do no wrong. They will pay him a boatload of money to stay. He doesn't have to coach rich men. He can stay there and basically be the biggest man in the state and get the red carpet rolled out for him wherever he goes if he stays in Michigan. But the NFL will probably say, if they'll pay you $10 million a year, maybe somebody will go out and pay him $15 million a year. So you're right. It's going to be controversy with that. The other thing is some coaches aren't as successful in the pros as they are in college. Nick Saban was actually one of them, coaching the Miami Dolphins, I think 2-3 years. And I believe they had losing seasons all 3 years, which is weird, right? We got another guy, Pete Carroll. He was the coach of the New England Patriots and I believe the New York Jets back in the 90s. He didn't have success until he got to USC, where he tore it up in college football, got back to the pros with the Seattle Seahawks for the last 14 years. And today, if you didn't hear about this, he was shown the door. He is no longer the coach of the Seattle Seahawks. They would like him to stay on in the front office, but the Seahawks are ready to move on as well. So very unique, right? So Coach Harbaugh has a really tough decision. Do I leave a program that I love, okay, that I've taken to the mountaintop and can probably take it there a couple more times? Now he's going to get the best recruiting classes to go coach in the NFL. I mean, I guess the key is, does he really want to be a Super Bowl winning coach? Okay. Pete Carroll, on the other hand, is like, well, I've been in Seattle for 14 years. They want me to stay in the front office. I think he's probably in his early 70s too.
72.
72. Should I go back and coach for another NFL team? Should I go back to college? What should I do? Because he probably still has some options, right? Okay. And then, you really just have to take a look at the entire picture, because you have more great coaches out there. But I think at the end of the day, okay, I'm going to put my money on Jim Harbaugh staying at Michigan. Now, maybe I'm just totally wrong, but I just think being treated like, like I said, the man up above and doing no wrong and just winning and winning and winning, life is pretty good in Michigan right now. Who's got it better? Nobody. So that's where I'm at with that. Pete Carroll, we'll see what happens with him. And then as I sort of wind down my intro here, the Washington Commanders, we hope, I'm telling you as a former Redskin fan, as a Redskin fan for life, okay? I don't know if I'm a Commanders fan. I keep saying that, right? I hope they get a young coach. It's a young man's game in the NFL. I think we tried to get 40-year-old quarterbacks. I think we try to get 50 and 60-year-old coaches, and nothing has worked. I think the best way to build a team is to get a young, hungry coach who's never won the Super Bowl but has demonstrated that he has the ability to be successful in the NFL. I think the same thing for the quarterback position. I think the same thing for all the positions on the team. Go young, hungry, with potential, as opposed to players and coaches that have been great. Because if their best days are behind you, then we don't need another 10 years of mediocrity.
That's all right, CJ.
All right.
CJ, get in before we get another segment. What you got?
There's a lot to get in. There's a Pete Carroll, I think, is in the same situation, like you said, as Nick Saban. They're just older. Like you said, the game will pass you by eventually. Like, the game is changing in terms of just how offenses and defenses are schemed, how players are recruited, what connects with players and things like that. And someone like Nick Saban or somebody like Pete Carroll, who's had success at every level, you might as well, like I said, go to the front office, go enjoy, like I said, a more leisurely job where you don't have to grind and do the 80-hour-a-week type of job, and just kind of move to the front office and do something like that. So I think that's what all the reports are saying about Pete Carroll as well, which is, it was pretty amicable situation. It wasn't like they canned him, but it was more about him moving on to a different role because he's in his 70s and he's been doing this for a while. So I think it's a similar situation, like I said, with Nick Saban's. Nothing else to prove in college football. There's nothing else to do. You can just keep trying to keep the juggernaut going, but he's done enough to kick his feet up and just enjoy his legacy at this point.
Okay. All right. Mr. Spivey, you are on deck. Let's go.
Gary, it's so much going on right now. It's a wild time. I'm sure you've heard about the Katt Williams interview with Shannon Sharpe.
He did an interview? Really?
that blew up the internet.
Yeah.
I think they said they had 40 million viewers within 24 hours of the interview. And Shannon Sharpe's podcast picked up, I think, 350 new subscribers. And it's been very interesting. I've been following it. Katt Williams dropped a dime on nearly everybody in the industry. And there's been a lot of people who have come out and spoke about it. But the unique thing, and I don't know if you all have been keeping up with it, but the unique thing is nobody's called him a liar. Everybody complains about what he said, but not one person has said he was a liar. And it was really funny. I looked at a skit today from Bernie Mac, and Bernie Mac came up during that interview because apparently Steve Harvey and Bernie Mac did not get along very well. And I didn't know that. That brings up another thing with the way that these people perform and what they go through to put on performance, but you never know it. But Bernie Mac was saying, if you're a comedian, you don't put your material out in front of other comedians. He said, because you'll be sitting home on the sofa and all of a sudden you'll hear your stuff on Netflix and you'll say, that was my shit. But he said, whoever spews it first is the person that gets the credit. I looked at a skit the other night and it was ironic. Katt Williams did a stand-up performance And 2 years later, and they showed both of them beside each other. And 2 years later, Steve Harvey was doing the identical joke and just changing a few of the narrative words, but it was the same identical joke. And so Bernie Mac was doing a skit, and he says, "You don't let other comedians hear your performance because you'll hear it on Netflix." He said it's kind of like you don't steal in front of the police because you'll get locked up. So it was really funny. But another thing that has been in the news that really gave me a newfound respect for Black actors and actors in general. I don't know if you all have been following all of the commentary with Taraji P. Henson. If you don't know who Taraji is, she played in Empire. She was Cookie, and she's a notable actress. But she played in The Color Purple, and she talked about the things that they went through in The Color Purple in making this movie. And the thing that I'm saying that makes it so outstanding to me is that you would never know the things that they've gone through when you see these movies. This is how much a constant professional that these people are. She talked about when they got to Atlanta and they were shooting The Color Purple, they gave them a rental car. And they were supposed to drive themselves from wherever they were staying to the set. A rental car. Can you imagine giving somebody a rental car in DC if you're shooting a film and Taraji P. Henson ends up lost in Southeast? I mean, that is unconscionable. And then she talked about how they didn't have any food on the set for the people when they were working. You were supposed to pick up your lunch or pick up whatever and bring it with you. But you would never know these things when you see The Color Purple. And to just give you an example, the things that she went through, The Color Purple debuted on Christmas Day. On Christmas Day, it brought in $18 million. To date, it's $54.6 million. It is estimated that before it's over, it will hit somewhere around $75 million. And you make this kind of money off of a movie, and you give the people a rental car to drive to the set, and you don't even have lunch for them. It's kind of sad. But it gives me a newfound respect for them because of the performance they put on and the way that they purport themselves, even going through this stuff in the background that we don't see. The only thing we see is the finished product on the screen, but we don't know what they go through. She talked about on the set of The Empire. I don't know if you're familiar, but Empire ran probably for like 7 or 8 years. She said they fought constantly on Empire to have trailers that were not infested with roaches. That is unheard of. And in that same vein, on the set of The Color Purple, they did not have trailers. You had to work in an open area. So if someone has an opinion on that or a comment, or if you've seen Katt Williams, because he talks about Bernie Mac, he talks about Steve Harvey. And from what I've been able to see over the past couple of days, Steve Harvey's taken a lot of hits because it's a lot of stuff that Katt Williams brought out is coming back to haunt. It's coming back to haunt him and a few other comedians, but also a couple of other comedians have basically verified some of the things that Katt Williams said. So I didn't know if any of you all have an opinion on it.
Oh, well, I've been following it, and the Color Purple thing. I mean, even when I was flying around as a consultant, I at least got a car service, and sometimes they flew me on private planes. So I'm like, man, the whole rental car thing is crazy. But the Katt Williams, like you said, nobody has called him a liar. So he didn't do. Let's put it this way: Jimmy Kimmel shut Aaron Rodgers up because Aaron Rodgers on that radio show talking smack. Jimmy Kimmel's like, all right, you want to prove this? Next thing you know, ESPN is apologizing. They cut Aaron Rodgers. He won't be on that show for the rest of the season. He's done. How you doing it? Somebody's talking, and if it ain't true, put up. I haven't heard anything. I mean, Bernie Mac's daughter, she was out.
She did.
She was very positive. So, I mean, everybody has their truth, but the bigger you are, you got to expect to be a target. As a friend of mine, Doc Semper, used to say, there's honor among thieves. So, let the joke teller. I'm gonna shut up. Let somebody else talk.
Hey guys, I was gonna say real quick, CJ. I'm sorry about that. I was just gonna say, in every business, people will do as much as they can get away with to pad their pockets, is financially. So, it's unfortunate to hear these stories about the film industry, the television industry, the comedy industry, but people will do as much as they can get away with. So you have to be educated on what you can and cannot ask for and how to approach everything in life. And you have to protect yourself, right? You say you use somebody's material, if you give it up, somebody will probably use it later on down the road and try to get credit for it. So it doesn't really surprise me, but it just goes to show you may be able to hire an attorney based on how much money you make, but you need to really be mindful of all the things you do each and every day and how you conduct your business, because people will still try to take advantage of you on any and every level unless you're prepared to defend yourself. That's all I got.
CJ.
Yeah, we saw a lot of this during the writer's strike and the writers and actors strike, where we saw the conditions that a lot of these actors go through. If you're not one of the A-list Tom Cruise type big actors, you saw that a lot of them get a lot worse treatment than you would think for somebody who is an actor, and what the studios, how they treat them, what they think of the actors. They're just ready to replace them with AI. They don't give a care about their residuals. They don't care about, their royalties. There's little things that came out, like, when TV shows have a second season and they change the name of the show, they do that not because for any creative reason, but they do that because if you change the name of the show, you don't have to pay the same cast royalties for the original first season.
Right.
So the Disney is a company that does that a lot for their kids shows and things like that. So it's just little practices like that are designed to screw over actors. We've seen firsthand the horror stories from Hollywood that, like I said, the industry is terrible to people who aren't the face of a movie, the A-list celebrities.
Okay. CJ, you just keep it rolling, and then we're going to come back to everybody for some. So if you forgot something in your 10 minutes, don't worry, we'll be back. CJ, the clock starts. Do it. Let's go.
Sure. So to start, I'm going to start with sports, and we'll go back to the Commanders a little bit, since we'll have a season kind of obituary for Ron Rivera and his staff right now, and to just kind of look back on Ron's era as it ended. Because when Ron got here, we were a bottom feeder team picking number 2 overall in the draft. And now, 4 years after Ron Rivera, we're picking number 2 overall in the draft, and we just have a vastly worse team in terms of talent. Because we have had 4 years of Ron Rivera draft picks. There was something that came out today on X or Twitter showing the draft room that they were going to trade up for Emmanuel Forbes. Not only were they going to take him in the first round, they were talking to New England to trade more picks, to trade up to get Emmanuel Forbes, the first-round pick who has been roasted more than anyone has seen a rookie be roasted and put in a terrible position by a team. So there's that. The atrocious draft history. The whole Ron Rivera selling point was culture. He's going to bring this culture and stability. Well, the exit interviews for the team came out, this week, and about 5 or 6 players highlighted the problem with the culture. There's a culture of mediocrity. There's a culture of losing. There's a culture of not holding certain players accountable and, holding other players a little too accountable. There's a big sentiment in the locker room that the players don't like Eric Bieniemy. So you could take for that what it is. Like, I'm not sure if it's a personality thing. I didn't love the fact that he wanted to throw the ball 50 times a game with a terrible offensive line, but that's more of a game plan thing. But it seems like there was an issue with the relationship that he had with certain players on the offense, key players. So there's something to think about there, dysfunction on the coaching staff. And just overall, what was the culture? This whole thing where Ron's talking about, we built a culture. A culture of what? Like I said, I saw nothing but mediocrity. I saw nothing but dysfunction. I saw a defense that wasn't even watchable. Like, I turned the game off most of the times just because it wasn't even a competitive game. They're barely out there fighting. So if that's the culture, then I don't think that's a win for the franchise either. So, I mean, Ron seems like a fine gentleman who is a nice guy, but in terms of football and winning, I don't know what he brought to the franchise in this 4 years, other than, again, making us substantially worse. If you look at our offensive line, you look at the talent all through the team, it's a lot worse than when Gruden was here. And Gruden era wasn't great. And so that's just a dark takeaway that we have here. So now they're staring at the number 2 overall pick. Good job for that, Ron. That was the best thing to do to keep him employed so they could get the highest draft pick possible. So now they have to see what the Bears want to do. And now do you want to go with a franchise quarterback? You can go with Caleb Williams. Yeah, you could try to trade up and secure the best quarterback in the draft. There's some others. Penix had a rough championship game, but he might be available somewhere in that first round somewhere. Drake May. There's other options for the Commanders. So it's about them getting a stable football culture in place, like a team president who's not incompetent, a head coach that's not incompetent. There's some rumors they're talking about the Lions offensive coordinator. They're talking about some other names, San Francisco executive. So they're moving fast. They somehow signed Bob Myers, a basketball executive, for some reason, but I'm sure we'll take whatever we can get. Guess they're going to sign Draymond at linebacker or something. That might help us in the middle. Some physicality out there. Somebody out there is going to lay a hit. But so I'm not sure what that's for. But yeah, it's going to be an interesting time in transition. We'll see who they put in place to actually make these decisions, and if they can trust somebody to actually get this right, because they've got 3 draft picks inside the top 50 picks, in this draft coming up, including the number 2 overall pick. So this is the time to try to reload, maybe trade some more players. I love Terry McLaurin, but I would like to see him free to play for a competent franchise and quarterback. He has had 4 straight 1,000-yard seasons, playing for 10 different quarterbacks, I believe, going back to Case Keenum and Dwayne Haskins and Taylor Heineke and Carson Wentz, and we just atrocious. So the fact that he's been a professional and consistent through all of that, I think, is telling. But he's about 30 years old. I think we should try to get the value for Terry and let him go somewhere and thrive. That's just my opinion. But that's just where I'll leave it with the Commanders. There's a lot of decisions to make football-wise, and they're at a crossroads right now. So we'll see if they can get the right decision makers to steer the ship. Because I will say, as a lifelong fan, it's getting hard to continue to watch the team be this uncompetitive and incompetent year after year after year after year after year. So that's where I'll leave it with the Commanders and transition to politics a little bit for the second half here. We had Joe Biden going to a black church and getting shouted down by ceasefire protesters. And their response for that was to chant 4 more years. And then Biden was there doing his usual Biden thing, just basically lying about how he started the civil rights movement or something, and just being incoherent. But the deeper issue with that, other than the optics of him obviously getting, having issues going out in public and trying to campaign, is that he, last poll, is down about 8 points in Michigan. He's down, actually down to Donald Trump in terms of Latino voters, which is crazy. The guy who said Mexicans are rapists and killers are up on Joe Biden right now with Latino voters, and Muslim voters and young voters. Donald Trump somehow has the lead, and they're still refusing to have primary debates. They're refusing to even entertain anyone other than Joe Biden being the candidate, despite him being, at this point, historically unpopular. He's backing this genocide still in Gaza, which, again, going back to the black church, is still a huge, huge problem for him that he can't shake. I have some quotes from his State Department when questioned on a few things by the media. And their first thing was to say that they wouldn't answer the question of whether, if Israel shutting off the civilian water supply constitutes a war crime. Spoiler alert, it is a war crime. But the U.S. government cannot say that. They can't come out and say that's a clear war crime. So they said that the investigation into that is meritless and counterproductive. Whether Israel shutting off the power and water to a civilian population of over 2 million people, mostly children, is a war crime. It is. And also, there's they keep saying that they're urging Israel to stop their indiscriminate bombing of civilians, but they're just lightly, they're still just a suggestion. They haven't said anything about withholding aid. They're just saying, like, hey, you've killed about 8,000 innocent babies right now. Could you guys cut it out And that's the extent of what the Biden administration will do to try to rein in Israel. So the things that continue to bother young voters, especially and Muslim voters, which you should care about as a voting bloc, which is important to him trying to win the election against the 91 felony guy, is the fact that there's going to be an issue. Like there was a viral news report that came out that was I'm trying to get the exact quote. Here it is. This is an example of the language that they use in terms of the war in Gaza. There were 9 Israeli soldiers killed in the conflict, and that was a front page news on like the New York Times. It said the cost of war, 9 Israeli soldiers. Again, there's been 8,000 or so Palestinian children who have been killed, but that's not the front headline. But here's the language for when the IDF they killed a 3-year-old Palestinian child in Gaza, and the news report said a bullet found its way into a van and killed a 3 to 4-year-old young lady. That is the language they use for when a Gazan child is killed by the IDF. I've never heard a 3-year-old referred to as a young lady, and I've never seen a bullet find its way into a van, somehow, and them not, kind of state who launched the bullet into the van and things like that. So it's a lot of things in the media, the way they're covering this, that people are seeing right through, and it's not resonating for Biden and his administration. And it's going to lead to bigger problems. Even if you don't care about Gaza, you don't care about Palestinian civilians, you don't care about the war. If you care about democracy, this is going to cause Joe Biden to lose to Donald Trump, the guy with the 91 felonies, who Fox News is going on TV right now and saying he could run the country from jail. That's where we're at. That's where we're coping and trying to figure out, well, because that looks like the most likely scenario we have, since the Democrats will not budge off of Joe Biden for any reason, despite him being 9,000 years old, not knowing where he's at, and still funding a genocide down 300 points to the orange felony guy. So that's where we're at politics-wise, and I'll leave it there.
CJ, I have a question for you. I've heard you talk a couple of times about Biden being unpopular with young voters. Was Biden unpopular because of his age? Was he unpopular prior to the Hamas as an Israeli thing? And secondly, who do you all think could beat Donald Trump? I know you're not thinking about Gary Newsom. He's out in California. California is not considered one of the states that's the hottest state in the world. They call it the land of fruits and nuts. So who do you think could, I've heard this before with young people. Biden is old. He needs to be replaced. Is it because of his age? Is it because of policies?
No. I'll tell you exactly what it is.
What do you think Biden could do to stop Netanyahu from doing what he's doing?
Well, he should come out with a stronger rebuke in terms of funding. It's like the only control we have over Israel is the amount of money that we give them. He has signed an executive order to bypass Congress to give them more weapons, to give them more money, and things like that. So those types of moves are going to make you unpopular with young people. It actually has nothing to do with its age, although it's kind of gaslighting, other than the fact they're gaslighting people into thinking that he is like completely fine. Where it's like, oh, he's fine. He's spry. He's down for another 4 years. That's ridiculous if you've seen him talk within the last 4 years. Well, but it's not the age. But it's not the age thing, because you know who young people really loved? Bernie Sanders. Bernie Sanders is super old too. He's older than Biden. So it's not an age thing.
My only comeback to young people would be, if you have a problem with Biden's policies, or you have a problem with this neo-Nazi that they're talking about that could go into the White House, because his policies with Putin and everybody else makes Biden's policies look like kindergarten. So, young, and the other thing I want to say is, do you think young people are not going to vote?
Yeah, absolutely. Young people will absolutely not vote, because, like I said, what are we voting for? If we're going to get the same results from Biden and we're going to get the same results from Trump, a lot of people aren't going to feel empowered to vote, and that's the issue. Biden could easily mobilize people by making a bigger contrast between him and Trump. A lot of his policies he left in place that Trump had implemented. Like a lot of people don't feel the material difference between Biden and Trump from their votes. And that's Biden's fault to not do more for people with the power that he has. Instead of shipping money to Ukraine and Israel, he could have been helping people here. We still have no health care here in America. You know who has health care? Israel. The people we're sending more of our money to for them to do an offensive war against mostly children. So like that's not going to make you popular when people are drowning over here, can't afford groceries, can't afford rent. And that's not, doesn't seem to be a concern of Joe Biden. So I'm not saying that Donald Trump is better, but what are people voting for with Joe Biden? People are going to get up, skip work, do what they got to do to stand in line and vote for Joe Biden, for him to basically spit in their face and not work for any of the policy positions that he promised to do, that he did, that he promised the first time around. So it's not like that people have these unrealistic expectations and want Joe Biden to be awesome, but being better than Trump is a really low bar. And if you can't hit that bar, then that's you need a new candidate. And who can beat Trump? According to the polls, nearly everyone, the generic Democrat, is better than Trump, because Biden himself is so unpopular from his lack of policies, I would say, more than anything, because Biden hasn't really done much of anything since he's been in office in terms of legislative accomplishments that people can feel. Like, what are Biden's accomplishments in 4 years, other than rent's more unaffordable? Let's see, like say the price of inflation, things like that are unimportant. That's what people feel. And that he has no plan and doesn't seem to address it. His whole thing is Trump is bad. We know Trump is bad. We've done 4 years of Trump. We've done 4 years of Biden. They feel the same for most people. So that's the issue of why young people are, and a lot of people, not just young people, aren't going to feel motivated to go vote for Joe Biden when he has not done anything for anybody. And his whole campaign is running on, hey, we need to stop Donald Trump again, when he is now literally the worst person for that job. According to every poll, according to every piece of data and metric, he is the person most likely to lose to Donald Trump. So if he really cared about that, if that was a sincere thing, like we need to save democracy, he would step aside and endorse anyone else, younger, more popular, even a Gavin Newsom like that. I'm not a huge fan of Gavin Newsom, but I think he would do better than Joe Biden right now in the polls, just because Joe Biden has a terrible, terrible legislative history. And Gavin Newsom doesn't have quite that beyond California. So like there's just the optics of just having a generic guy whose brain is not melting, who is not actively funding a genocide, would be a better choice than Joe Biden right now, who has not really done anything to differentiate himself from Donald Trump other than not have 91 charges.
Well,
I want to say something on this. I think we got to really pay attention to what CJ's saying. One thing about crossing that bar of an age called 50, okay, is once you cross that bar of an age called 50, there are more younger people behind us than there are older people in front of us, right? Mm-hmm. I think we have to really pay attention to what he's saying, because what CJ is saying makes a lot of sense to me, because I run the calculations and numbers on anything I do. A young man who definitely didn't like math growing up uses it every day in everything I do. And based on calculations I've seen, if there are more young people than retired people, and it appears to be that's the case right now, and those younger people are trending towards voting for the lesser of two evils. What CJ is basically saying is we can run anybody up there. We can run anybody. Young people would rather take a chance on a young person with enthusiasm who's in politics, even if they only have 5 or 10 years of political experience, than to put an 82-year-old man back in, has done nothing but have increased inflation, and try to defend his son, who seems to be in trouble with the law every other day. Look, I'm a Democrat. I don't want Trump to win. The bottom line is Trump's going to win. I said it here. Trump's going to win unless we run somebody else, okay? Like I said, maybe it's Mays Gilliam from Head of State, the 2004 Chris Rock movie. I don't know. But we better run somebody who's younger. If we don't, the question will soon become not whether Trump wins, who's Trump's running mate in case he actually gets convicted on some of these 91 charges, okay? And then he's going to use presidential immunity, and then he's going to try to outlive the charges. I mean, a man who's 78, I mean, if he lives to be 100, he's going to try to delay this in court for over 20 years. I'm telling you right now, the question will soon become, who is Trump's running mate? Because they may be the next president of the United States. Nobody seems like Kamala Harris. So we're not. So I think what CJ is saying carries a lot of weight. Look, in this country, to be the president of the United States, you have to be an effective leader. Joe Biden is not an effective leader. Okay, that's the problem. Trump, whether you can be an evil effective leader and a good effective leader. Some people will say Trump's an evil effective leader. Some people say he's a good effective leader. The problem is, the bottom line is, Trump's actually an effective leader. He can have people attack the Capitol, something that's never ever been done before. Okay, he's an effective leader, whether he's good or bad, and he's probably going to win. So I think CJ's right on. I think we better get somebody else to run against him. If we don't, just start thinking about who Donald Trump's running mate's going to be, because they might end up being president. That's my political take.
Yeah, for how incompetent Donald Trump is, like you said, he actually got a lot done for the people that he was working for. Tax cuts for the rich, those went through. He ain't build a wall, he ain't do all that, but he cut them taxes for the rich, for the indefinite future, for people in his tax bracket. So he gets things done for his donors. It's not the things that we want, but he's effective, like you said, at implementing his agenda. It's just a terrible agenda for most of the American people.
And he's definitely not professional. But other than that, I don't want him to win. I'm not a Republican, but his leadership, his ability to rally people is going to go down in history as one of the greatest things ever for his base. Now, again, can we get somebody else to run? We probably could, but they won't back up off of it. So we have to figure out what's going to happen, because you're right. If young people don't go out and vote, Trump's definitely in there. It's like it's going to be a landslide. So we have to figure this out. Those 91 charges, his lawyers are great. Has he been convicted of anything yet?
No, he's not been convicted of anything. And right now, he's in the appeals court because he's fighting Judge Chunkin's ruling that he does not have immunity while he's in office. So he had a rough day in court today. He went to the appeals court. It was a 3-judge panel. And I'm sure tonight Donald Trump is in really bad shape, because his 3-judge panel was a Black woman, an Asian woman, and a white woman. And the white woman was 79 years old. She's only 2 years older than Donald Trump. And she was appointed to the bench by Ronald Reagan. And neither one of the 3 judges bit on the argument that his lawyers was trying to put up today. There's a ruling, and it's a law called the Impeachment Judgment Clause. And what the Impeachment Judgment Clause entails is that if a president is convicted or impeached in the House and convicted in the Senate, he can then be removed from office and precluded from running for office in the future. He also can be criminally charged. Now, did you listen when I say impeached, convicted, removed from office, and criminally charged? Donald Trump's argument before the appellate court is that he was not convicted in the Senate, and so he was not removed from office. So he cannot be criminally charged. He's trying to flip it, the rule, and go back the tail end and move it to the front. So they're waiting for a ruling. The sad part about it is, if he wins the appeal and it goes to the Supreme Court, where he has the majority of the judges that he put on the court, if he wins in the Supreme Court, every one of the cases go out of the door.
Mr. Spivey, does that mean
only one case will be able to stand? The one in Atlanta, the one in DC, they are gone. The only one that will stand will be the one down in Florida, where he had the classified documents, because that was after he was in office and he would have no immunity. However, the judge in that case has already shown that she is sympathetic to Donald Trump, because he's the one that appointed her to the bench. Also, that particular case, there's no minimum mandatory sentence. So she does not even have to, even if he's convicted, she does not have to give him a jail sentence.
So Mr. Spivey, so basically what you're saying is, if Trump is going down and the Democrats don't run anybody else, do you think Nikki Haley or DeSantis can beat Biden?
The polls say yes.
No, I don't believe so.
And this is where I'm going to agree with CJ. I'm going to agree with CJ and say yes. I'm telling you, I think the
polls say yes.
Everybody except Biden.
Well, I'm going to disagree with you all, because I don't believe that in this late date of January, you can throw anybody, just go get anybody, as CJ say, get somebody off the street and put them up as a Democrat and run against
There's two people running against him in the primary.
I don't think you can do that. I really don't. But the
It's
bottom line is, it's kind of that old saying, who is the best of both evils? Who is the lesser of both evils? You know, you brought up the thing about retired folks like myself and Gary. There's more young people behind us than the retired folks.
Right.
Well, you know, the thing you better keep in mind, if Trump goes back in, Trump can't do a whole lot to the retired folks. He can't screw with your Social Security. He can't screw with your retirement. But the people he can affect is those young ones that you said is behind us.
And they're already getting screwed under
and
Biden.
He's already laid out. He says if he goes back in, his first order of business is to attack each of his enemies. He says that he's going to completely get rid of the FBI, which he probably will do.
He created the Space Force.
So, you know, you got to think about that, you know.
I'm not arguing that Biden is not the lesser of two evils, but he's got to make that case to the American people, of people who aren't knee deep in politics, who are looking at the nitty gritty. Because if you're looking on the surface, most people don't feel a material difference in their lives between Trump and Biden. And like I was saying before, it's a policy thing. Like Biden could easily do this by just being a little bit more progressive. That's what young voters want. That's a strategic decision. If you want to win the election, is to maybe go a little bit less conservative and a little bit less old school status quo in your politics, because that's not really what young people want. But he's sticking to his guns despite the polls saying that he's going to get annihilated in the polls, not lose by in a close race or be competitive. It looks to be a bloodbath in terms of Donald Trump. And if it was Nikki Haley or anyone else on that Republican side, it's a Joe Biden problem more than a Democrat as a whole problem. There are two people running against him in the primary too. They just will not advertise them because they're set in saying there's no primary. Joe Biden's going to be the candidate no matter what. Marianne Williamson is polling better on the Democratic side than any of the Republican challengers to Donald Trump, who are all getting town halls, who are doing debates. Christie, Haley, Marianne Williamson has higher poll numbers than all of them on the Democratic side, but they won't talk about her because she's progressive and they won't allow that in the party. So they're just saying Biden's the only choice. You don't get to even look at anyone else. You don't even get to debate anyone. Like, it's just Biden. That's your only choice. That's a terrible decision. That's going to blow up in their face, not even give voters a choice. Because if Biden was the strongest candidate, being an incumbent president, he would destroy a primary challenger. If he was popular, if he was the strongest candidate, he would breeze through a primary on the Democratic side and then be able to challenge Trump. But that's not the case. They're hiding him because they know Joe Biden, he can't debate Donald Trump. He can't debate the cat, my dad's cat down there in Florida. Like, Joe Biden is not capable of like he said, running a country like right now. Just it's not just his age, just his mental abilities. Like, Donald Trump is also old, but he seems to be sharper mentally, unfortunately, even though he's insane. Yeah. But in terms of him being able to complete a coherent thought, that he's better than Biden, unfortunately. And like, they gotta have a reckoning of self-reflection in the Democratic Party, because what's coming out right now in terms of the reporting is most of them are fine to lose to Donald Trump as long as they don't lose their spot in the party, their favorability. A lot of people they're fine to go down with the Joe Biden ship as long as they're seen as being team players. So the next election around, they'll still be in high regards in the party and the politics and within the Democratic Party. So it's not a sincere thing when they're fear-mongering, talking about, hey, you got to vote for us or Donald Trump, when it seems like they don't care whether they lose to Donald Trump as long as they have their grip on power still within the party. So that's the issue a lot of people are seeing through. I believe that Joe Biden is a better choice than Donald Trump, like, honestly, even though I think they're both untenable choices for the American people. But in terms of Donald Trump just being a maniac who would totally try to subvert democracy, I think he's crazier and probably more dangerous. But in terms of Joe Biden not being able to make a case to the American people as to why he's better than the crazy 91 felony guy is a Joe Biden problem and not a voter problem.
Well, I have another question. What is driving the unpopularity among the young folks with Kamala Harris?
She was never popular to begin with. That's the issue.
I want to know what makes her so unpopular.
It was her policies in California, but when she was running, they made her unpopular. She was a very tough on crime prosecutor. She locked up a lot of people for things like weed and laughing about that. And then going on the Breakfast Club talking about how she used to smoke weed and listen to Tupac before Tupac was even an artist and things like that. So there's an inauthentic air of her being inauthentic and unlikable in terms of things like that, and just personality wise. If we're just talking politics, that's I mean, it is what it is. I mean, that's what people.
Hold on, I got the elephant in the room. Nobody wants to talk about it, right? Nobody wants to say this about Kamala Harris. I like Kamala. She all right with me. But I'm just saying, the elephant in the room, another thing people won't say out loud they don't like about Kamala. Kamala's husband is not black. People won't say that. But if she had showed up with a Jesse Jackson type husband, she'd be a lot more popular right now. I'm just saying. That may not have nothing to do with it.
Carlos, in that vein, that may be true. And
it may be true. That's what I'm saying.
I would not doubt it, but you look around the Supreme Court Justice, Ketanji Brown. Her husband's not black. Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas. His wife is not black. I mean, I can keep it going.
No, you
can't. I don't even think that's the main concern.
If that is the basis for you disliking,
it is not the basis for me.
But I think
I don't think that's the main issue.
That's not the main issue.
The problem that I have is today that's social media, and it's just like that with the Katt Williams thing.
Yeah.
A small thing. People today, they love drama, they love dirt. Okay, so when you tell me that she was hard on crime, she locked up people, she smoked marijuana, and went on the Breakfast Club and talked about it. And
everybody's gonna get 3 minutes, so keep going. Everybody gonna get 3 minutes. Keep on.
That makes her unpopular. I have a hard time with that because I want to know about policies. I want to know about concrete stuff. I'm not concerned with Kamala Harris smoking weed. And if you talk about hard on crime, I would love to see her ass sitting in the Justice Department now and get real hard on these little suckers out here, 14, 15, 16 years old, that's carjacking people and putting people in the grave. Somebody needs to be hard on crime. So I would love to see her, not the vice president, but the attorney general.
I don't think her smoking weed is a problem. It's her locking up a bunch of people for that and then saying she was smoking weed in that same time period while she was gleefully locking up and taking people's freedom away for something that she admitted that she does in her free time. That's the hypocriticism. And the only thing I'll add to that is a question. Why is Kamala Harris the vice president? She wasn't popular. She wasn't the strongest candidate against Joe Biden. She didn't even win her home state of California. She dropped out before she even got to California because she wasn't doing well in her run for president. So why is Kamala Harris even the vice president?
Well, I'll do like Carlos. I'll talk about the elephant in the room. Joe Biden chose it because he wanted the black vote. I mean, the bottom line. I mean, it's just like when John McCain was running. What did they do? They pushed Sarah Palin on him because he was trying to get the women. So
that's my point, though. It wasn't for her merit. It was because he needed the optics of having a black woman be his running mate.
On the same hand, she was qualified for the job. Okay.
Well, Donald Trump was president. Anybody's qualified for these jobs at this point. Like, I mean,
anybody's qualified to be the president.
It's presentation.
I mean, you talking about an idiot that's getting ready to come back in that can't give you more than four syllable words. And you talk about the next election. Keep in mind, one of the things that Donald Trump says is going to be his objective if he goes back into the White House, that there will be no more elections, that he will be president for life. So keep that in mind when you talk about the next election.
Look, I think everything comes down to presentation, guys. Bottom line is Donald Trump has a better presentation than Joe Biden right now. If you don't present well, you can't win. It's not how things are. It's how things appear to be. Trump's presentation is better. I'll take it back to this. Who had a better presentation in NFL at defensive back? Was it Deion Sanders or Darrell Green? Deion Sanders played for 5 teams, played about 14 years in the league. Darrell Green played for one team for 20 years. They didn't even have to think about drafting a defensive back for 20 years. He was probably the better defensive back, but Deion Sanders had the better presentation. So guess what? Guess who gets remembered by everybody in the NFL? Prime time, not Darrell Green. Only the people who remember Darrell Green are the people who were his fans or fans of the Washington Redskins. So presentation by Trump is trumping presentation by Biden. And I still think Detroit will win the Super Bowl. I'm sorry, take it back. The Baltimore Ravens will win the Super Bowl over Detroit. Detroit's going from the NFC, the Ravens from the AFC, and Lamar Jackson will be the MVP in the Super Bowl. I said it right there.
All right, CJ, clean it up.
Yeah, that's basically what Carlos said. It's a messaging problem from Biden. Like I said, it's not me who has to make the case for Joe Biden. It's Joe Biden that has to make the case on why he's better than the 91 felony guy, and he's not doing a good job. Like that's just the bottom line. Like Joe Biden needs to do a better job, and the Democrats of explaining to the American people why he's better than Trump, not just because Trump is dangerous, but what he is going to do for them in the next 4 years. There seems to be no agenda other than, hey, we got to keep Trump out. And then what? Then, like, a lot of people are asking that question. Again, I agree with you that Donald Trump is super dangerous. But again, I'm not the one who needs to make that case. I'm not the one running for president. I can try to convince people as much as I can, but Joe Biden's not making a big difference between himself and Trump, other than, like I said, Trump going to the full extreme of being like, I will literally be a dictator going into the office. Like, but in terms of people's policies, in terms of the policy positions that the George Floyd Justice Act, we didn't get that. All the little things that Biden says on paper and the Democrats do that is so performative, it's not working anymore. Like people would like a healthcare system. People would like to go to the doctor without medical bankruptcy. That's a big, big priority. That's something that in every election cycle since Obama, people have been trying to beg for. And Joe Biden has no plan to address that. It's things like that. He could easily just say, hey, I'll at least do a public option. I won't even do Medicare for all. I won't even do, because he said he would veto healthcare for everyone. So again, things like that make Joe Biden unpopular. Saying you're going to veto universal healthcare in America if it gets to your desk is not going to make you popular, not just with young people, but with most people, because medical debt is only a thing here in America. Again, most of these other countries we're sending bombs and money to, their citizens can go to the doctor without going broke. There's little things that he could do here. He talked about descheduling marijuana, never got around to doing that. That's an issue that affects a lot of people, especially young people, that might help him in the polls. And again, with Muslim and Arab voters, a block that he really needs, him, murdering their families or funding it, maybe not directly doing it, but sending the money and the bombs and the go-ahead to bomb their families is not going to make him popular with the Arab and Muslim base in the country. Like, that's a Joe Biden problem that he could easily fix. Those are self-inflicted wounds. So as much as, Trump is dangerous, Trump seems to be completely avoidable if we had a competent challenger to him.
Woo, woo, woo. Time. Oh my goodness. I wish we had more time. Fellas, this was a show. This was a show. As an outside observer, this was a generational show. This was generational. I mean, like top, middle, and bottom. I mean, this was it. So for those of you watching the show, wherever you are, you all decide. You decide. Everybody had their take. We are the Thought Brothers. And until next week, we are out of here.
Good night.
Have a good week, people. Enjoy the NFL games.
This program is made possible by the friends of the All-in-One Master Tonic and MasterChefGary.com. If you can identify with any of the things behind me, then you owe it to yourself to try the All-in-One Master Tonic. The tonic has worked miracles and wonders for me in terms of weight loss. I've lost about 50 pounds using the tonic and common sense principles such as exercise and proper eating. Look, go to www.masterchefgary.com, have access to free recipes. You can follow my weight loss journey and learn more about the tonic. If I can do it, you can too. That's www.masterchefgary.com. Health is wealth. Don't put a price tag on your health. Do it now.